Hello folks, quite a while since I've done a video. Now, so just some interesting intuitions I've had since the weekend, which I spent in London, and just subjects covered, looking at certain things, and in sync with what we've already been doing in relation to looking at how they've shifted warfare from mechanics to situations, which of course are then being fired through the media. So one bullet, one man is no longer the issue for them. It's one bullet or a situation can affect billions of people. So they've certainly advanced the method of warfare against the populations. Of that there is no doubt. Now, on the last live stream we did, which we didn't do on this week, of course, because I was in London, we were going through the documents afforded to the silent weapons for quiet wars. And we pulled up on the energy side of things, and I'm just going to repeat that because it can follow on into some other subject matter that's rather interesting. Okay, so referring to the document, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, on energy, it says, energy is recognized as the key to all activity on Earth. Natural science is the study of the sources and control of natural energy, and social science, theoretically expressed as economics, is the study of the sources and control of social energy. Both are bookkeeping systems or mathematics. Basically, what they're telling us there is they're looking at always at how they can control energy. So that's natural energy, but more importantly, it's the energy that you're expressing in as you exist here. Are you operating autonomous for yourself, for your family, or have they managed to capture you to their agenda, to their intent, in order they can fulfill the secret agenda that they've had going for thousands of years, the great work of the ages as it's known. It says, therefore, mathematics is the primary energy science. So what they're saying there is that mathematics is the science they use in order to enable them to take full control of the populations, okay, and all natural resources. Now, mathematics isn't math, okay? Math is simplicity, Mathematics is complexity, and that's how they ensure that the majority of you out there will not even entertain trying to understand what it is they're actually carrying out, because, of course, the complexity of the mathematics is just ridiculous, and most people will switch off. Also, for those that are moving into the arena where they may realize the simplicity is the way, then they have to be programmed to this system of complexity or mathematics to keep them off the simplicity of math. So I've covered that there. We will get into detail on that later. But basically what it's saying is mathematics is their weapon in order for them to achieve full control over the natural resources and especially the energy of the populations in relation to how you as an individual are operating in this world, because of course you're no longer on the earth if you're trapped in with this. It says, therefore, mathematics is the primary energy science, and the bookkeeper can be king if the public can be kept ignorant of the methodology of the bookkeeping. Yeah, bookkeeping simplicity, but when you start to enter the mathematics of it, it becomes exceptionally complex, which is why most people will opt to take on an accountant. It just looks, I'm not and away you go. There's somebody else to do it for you, thus keeping you out of understanding what it is they are doing. As long as you're only looking at the end figures, how much am I earned and how much am I paying? That's pretty much it. When in reality, if you're looking after your own things, you know well in advance what you had to pay and what you didn't have to pay. So not a shock at the end of the year, as it were. All science is merely a means to an end. The means is knowledge. The end is control. Beyond this remains only one issue. Who will be the beneficiary? So that's basically just reiterating what we spoke of in the last live stream that we did in relation to these documents. silent weapons for quiet wars. Now, what I'm trying to draw your attention to here is just the mathematics of it. The fact that we've understood now that mathematics is a specific means, a method for these elites to keep you out, pull people in, and obfuscate simplicity and hand over complexity. And of course, I've had to say many times on these videos and in my written work, the truth is simple. It's getting there that's the difficult part of this life, because of course everybody's stuck in the complexity and they're not looking at the simplicity. So if we can keep that in mind, mathematics is a weapon, okay? And it's used to one end, and that is to gain control over all natural energy. So that's off the earth. It's also your energy as you express it. So that's that little bit out of the document. I just wanted to represent so it can help make this next raft of information make sense. Okay, now we're into some conjecture, okay, on my behalf. Now, you're all aware that there's all sorts of things going on in the Antarctic that we are not aware of, we're not allowed to know, and all efforts are kept to ensure that is the case. But what people need to recognise is that Antarctica for a long time has been a sort of neutral zone, a place where all the governments of nations involved can happily get on with what they're doing without any threats of war, etc., etc. A big part of that, and that's in the treaties that have been surrounding Antarctica, is that no offspring are to be born on Antarctica. So nobody's allowed to go if they're pregnant, and efforts have always been made while on there to separate and segregate in order that there are no pregnancies while they're on Antarctica itself. That was blown away rather in the 60s with Argentina and Chile sort of competing as to how many children they could each birth on the lands of Antarctica. Now, when I looked into that, sort of the reason why they wouldn't want people to be birthed, or born on Antarctica, the land, is because, of course, then you're creating a race that can claim ownership because they're of the land. So that, and in and of itself, is extra information and evidence for those who are still a bit struggling to understand how land and man operate. It's just further, these are in treaties that it's been, no way can anybody form offspring on Antarctica for that very reason. So it's important. Now, at the moment, there are big issues going on around Antarctica because China is trying to, it's breaking treaties and it's trying to basically take it over. And this from the strategist, it's a report, and it just says, the Antarctic Treaty System, which has governed affairs in Antarctica since 1961, is struggling under the weight of great power competition. Through gaps in governance framework, states are exploiting the treaty and its subordinate protocols to pursue their national interests. This article examines the nature and extent of great power competition in Antarctica and considers how Australia is a claimant to 42% of the continental landmass and can seek to protect Antarctica and its own interests, which again was a surprising statistic. I wasn't aware that Australia actually had the biggest claim on Antarctica, and it does by a huge margin. So that in and of itself is important, because obviously for the Western powers to have allowed that, obviously Australia is going to be a gateway into Antarctica, or until China has started to push its weight around in the old Antarctica. It's basically took over New Zealand, as we've discussed in previous live streams, and has set up systems whereby it's collecting all the 60 million Chinese emigres that are in all nations across the world to pull them together to operate as a network in order to push China's great, China's fantastic everywhere, in all the nations that they're in, basically, because, of course, as we know, China's model is the model that they intend to thrust across the entire globe under the no-hide system. So Antarctica, it says, offers great treasure in natural resources, scientific opportunity and national prestige. Antarctica's prizes include fishing stocks, bioprospecting opportunities, climate science analysis and hydrocarbons, with potential reserves of between 300 and 500 billion tonnes of natural gas on the continent and potentially 135 billion tonnes of oil in the Southern Ocean. Well, that's a bit of a misnomer because, of course, oil isn't a fossil fuel and any well drained will replenish if you leave it for 5 years or so. You don't even have to leave it that long, but if it's a big well, in 5 years we'll refill it because, of course, oil is a part of the Earth system and it's replenished. The idea that it's a fossil fuel was forced onto geologists in the late 1800s by the House Rothschild, who paid big money and bribed lots to ensure that it became categorized as a fossil fuel. So, of course, that they can attack it today because they knew full well that they were only going to be using oil for a certain length of time once they'd built up their nuclear power for their own enclaves. This is the elite, of course. Then they would no longer require oil. They would no longer require the populations to pull it out and of course, the population to buy it. So there we go. That's we're all aware of, etc. So New Zealand has been taken over pretty much by China. So most of the New Zealand government officials are operating for her. And Australia, being a 42% own a claim on Antarctica, is the target. So that's an interesting concept that we also need to keep in mind. Now, that said, so we can see that Antarctica is a place that everybody is looking to control. And if we go back to the silent weapons document, and it says, all science is merely a means to an end. The means is knowledge, the end is control. Beyond this remains only one issue: who will be the beneficiary? So we've gone through its resources that are there, but still, given we know oil is replenishable, that we can cancel that out as a figure and sort of something they're chasing, gas perhaps, but not really. However, there's got to be another reason why all of a sudden the treaties of Antarctica are being uprooted by China and, as it said, other unscrupulous governments trying to gain advantage. Now, this is my conjecture, and that is it the case that this new AI system that they're building and setting up is to be based in the Antarctic? One, it would automatically be cooled. You know, it's a cool, temperate atmosphere. But more importantly, it's off limits to any other nation, any military, to actually, once they set things up completely under the AI, nobody can demolish it. Yeah, does that make sense? So that's my conjecture in relation to AI, Antarctica, and why China is forcing and pushing and breaching, along with others, the long-held treaties all around Antarctica. Okay, so that's the end of that subject matter. It just ties in with it, so I thought I'd present that just to get it in your mind so you can start thinking in these terms, that there is a reason why Antarctica is so secretive. And though these treaties have gone on since the 60s, and they've all been in and at it since the 1800s, it's an important place. It's an important place, and one thing we all know is we're not allowed. We're not allowed to see, we're not allowed to sail, we're not allowed to fly over. That is a fact, and it's been so for a very, very long time. So there has to be a reason why Antarctica is so important to the global elite. So this is another sort of weekend-inspired, in conjunction with other topics that I'm actually looking into at the moment, etc., etc. But it carries on from the mathematics. So basically, if we go with that document, we're looking at a reality in which mathematics has been created specifically to take us off the simplicity of math in relation to applying it to how we understand the Earth and how we understand life itself. So they needed to take us off the simplicity onto the complexity. And so we could say that math is simplicity, mathematics is the complexity. So we're just going to run through a couple of topics and just see if I can portray this in the way that the the sort of internal feelings are pushing me to see things, as it were. I hope I'm not doing it too early and I'm missing out on data that could probably be in. But if you just absorb this, I'm sure some of you guys out there will have things you can add to this, so we can sort of build it if it's a narrative that's actually going on in the background while everybody's focused to the mechanical wars going on in the Ukraine and failing to recognise the actual bullets being fired in this war are situations sent through the media, telegraphed previously in the film, so through Hollywood, etc., etc. To keep you in this nonsense complexity when in reality everything is the warfare's changed and it's being thrown upon you from within your own borders through the media. So what we'll start with is that nature itself, nature as a language. Okay, now of course, the earth is nature, is it not? Not because I say so, but because that is a fact. The God of the earth is the Heavenly Father, if we go through the Gospels, is it not? Yeah. Now, just at that point, I just want to point this out that I've recently just looked at, and that is when you look at the KGV Genesis story, what you find is there's only one chapter in Genesis that matters, and it's chapter 1. And in chapter 1, it uses the term God, which of course I don't like, because there's pick your God, there's thousands of them. But it just sticks to that term in beginning the creation story, the heavens, the earth, etc. Now, when you get to chapter 2, and remember this is the KGV, King James version, all of a sudden, there's another word added, which continues through the rest of Genesis. And so all of a sudden, from chapter 2 onwards, you get Lord. Okay? Baal, that's what it is. So all of a sudden, you get the original piece of the original creation story in chapter 1. And then from that point on, everything in this creation story, which you miss, isn't the same creator. This is Lord or Baal, your God. Yeah, the Lord is thy God. Yeah, which I've covered before. Very interesting that people recognize that, because I don't care how long you've been studying this stuff, you haven't recognized that. So go and have a look at your Genesis and see what I'm telling you. The only chapter in that whole book on the creation is the chapter 1. And that's a take from an older doctrine. Okay? Everything after that, you're talking about the God of the world. Yeah? The inverse. All right? It's inverse because then you've moved into... So the first chapter is math. The second chapter onwards is moving you into mathematics under the false, the Lord. Okay? So that, I hope you can understand that, because it is so important if we are to start to make sense of the doctrine, the biblical doctrine that matters, and remove all the pish, because it's the pish that everybody is following, and thus are creating the world, as it were. Now, so nature, it says has a language, but nature is a language. And I've written formulas and sequences in nature. So these are formulas and sequences that we can observe, include the Fibonacci sequence, the golden ratio, sacred geometry, and phi. And that's amongst other patterns that you can find if you're looking at number in how nature operates. The senses, so that's our senses, rely on the Fourier transforms. Now, I'm not 100% sure I understand what they are, but they are something that science uses to measure, okay? And they're called the Fourier transforms, which means the same math in the sensory world. So the way that our biological system operates in sensing and computing everything that's out there is the same. It's exactly the same method as they use when they're creating holograms. Just take that on board there, because I've said it before when people have asked about the flat earth, and I've said to them, look, I've looked at the data. It's very clear that a lot of the science that they offer undermines the heliocentric model as we've been given it. But of course, that heliocentric model that we've been given is through the eyes of mathematics, not math, which is the simpler version. And we also have to take on board that. If that is the case, as I've said, the reason why I'm not too obsessed with the flat earth as to whether it is or it isn't is because I've studied the Eastern philosophies. I have a good grasp on how the electromagnetic systems work and how that plays in with the ether. And that being the case, then you're following that science, you're coming up and banging on the door of holographic universe. So round, square, pink, purple, or whatever is irrelevant if this whole show is actually a hologram. Yeah? So it's why I've never spent more than time I needed just so I at least knew what the guys were talking about. I put no more effort in it, okay? So just reminder on that. And the reason why I've brought into this the hologram. So basically our senses that we as a biological system use are the same rules, and they're called Fourier transforms, that science uses in order to create these holograms, which they have created. So that's not a maybe or a theory, that's a fact. Okay, so I just thought I'd add that. Now, to continue, the golden ratio is the evidence that the entire universe is an intelligently designed thing. And the golden ratio pans out at 137.5, thereabouts. It just get a bit more, you can dissect it to a smaller, a bit more, but 137.5 is the golden ratio. And if you look at this Fibonacci sequence, it's always moving to the golden ratio. It says so it's simplicity. We're counting in simplicity. So the Fibonacci sequence, again, you'll probably know that it's 1, 1. You add the 2 and the 1, you know, it gives you 3. You add the 3 and the 2 gives you 5. The 5, the 3 and the 5, 8. And that's how, and it misses the 3, 6, 9. Okay, so we're aware that in the Fibonacci sequence, apparently missing is the 3, 6, 9. Now, the 3, 6, 9, of course, is what? Tesla. He operated from that foundation, the 3, 6, 9. Okay, so that's the Fibonacci sequence, and as I said, misses the 3, 6, 9. So these are two concepts that we have to keep in mind. But the Fibonacci sequence itself is simplicity, it's math. It's simple addition. That's all it is. There's nothing complex about it. And that is how nature expresses the manifestation dependent on what frequency is coding it or instructing it. Okay? So the frequency, energy is itself the source of all. Depending on what frequency is affecting that energy will depend on how nature manifests it in the physical realm, as we can see, or the holographic realm. Okay? I hope that's not too complex. So that's the simplest. So math is simple, Fibonacci sequence, golden ratio, phi, etc., etc. Simple math. There's nothing complex about it at all. It's just patterns or sequence, as it's called. Now, mathematics is complexity itself. As we've explained, we've looked at the fact that they're claiming that they're using it for that particular reason, for control. Yeah. It says mathematics is so complex, and I put by design. It hides the importance of the golden ratio in that it is not just found in architecture, but also in the living body. This knowledge is not part of any of the school curriculums, has been so for a long time. I mean, they give you a bit of a geometry, but it's not simplicity. They've made it complex. So can you see how they've offered up this sort of renaissance, as it were, through the Rosicrucians, but really what they threw out with mathematics, a means by which they can obfuscate what we can naturally find out ourselves, and instead of us following it in the simplicity, we follow it in the complexity, and then you're going to join these secret societies. I mean, that's a done deal. That's been done and dusted, and now we're at the end of it, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, you guys that are in there stuck because you did the same kind of thing I did, but you went through the other door. These are the kind of concepts that you didn't see, which is why you went through that door. It doesn't mean to say that you can't start to see things as they are now, does it not? You know what I'm saying? Enough of you leave all these societies, then they're not going to be cutting your right out anyway, or you off you took your blood off. So, strength in numbers, and that's what needs to be looked at that way. So again, mathematics is hiding the golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence, and pi, deliberately. Because if you were to pursue it from the simplicity of that, you'd be dealing with reality and the earth, how nature works, how nature manifests. When you go through mathematics, they took us off the earth into the world and captured our energy because we're all focused to the mathematics. Yeah? And I hope that's making sense on why we started off with the document just explaining that mathematics is actually a weapon. So I hope that makes sense. I don't want to be going up my own arse here, which is possible. It says, pi as a math formula is apparent in nature's structures, and as a number is approximately 1.618. Okay, so these are just simple numbers. There's no complexity to them whatsoever. No multiple whatever. You know what I'm saying. And this is, so the tail of a seahorse manifests as the math formula or ratio of 1.618. The same is with seashells, okay? Snails, pine cones, and many flowers, which we all know, do we not? All the flowers, most of nature, is always striving through the Fibonacci sequence to hit the golden ratio. It says storms such as tornadoes and hurricanes also manifest at the 1.618 formula as they are forming. So that circle, whether it's a tornado or a hurricane, are following that same sequence. But this is also true of galaxies. If you look at the spiral galaxies, they're also following the same formula, and so the planets in their movements, etc. So this simplicity, what they're not teaching you in the colleges and the schools, is what they're obfuscating with the mathematics. Yeah, is that helping you to grasp that what they were telling us in that initial document? And it says many ancient cultures use the spiral in their art and to adorn the body, either as tattoos or emblazoned on the claws, weapons and artifacts found. And the Norse were no different. The spiral was one of the main tattoos you'd find, or one of embellished on some leather. This is the ancient knowledge, the simplicity of things before this mathematics pish and all this crap that really basically came out. It came over from the Crusades through the Templars and then was thrown out into in the public world through the Renaissance, through the Rosicrucians and affiliated secret societies. Now, on the body, also the human body, so it says on the body, 1.618 is classed as a divine proportion. So if you're looking for beauty, the closer you get to 1.618, then beauty, is showing itself. So we all have this map inherent within us as to what beauty is. And as a biological system, the closer that biological system has manifested in tune with 1.618, the more beautiful that body is apparent to everybody. And I mean everybody. Yeah, it's inherent in us. So this is the math, the simplicity, nature, Fibonacci, golden ratio, exactly what they don't teach you, exactly what mathematics is for, and to hide, so they can gain control of how you express your energy by operating in the field that they offer. Yeah? So it says on the body, 1.618 is classed as a divine proportion and is the measure or standard of beauty. It is also used to determine the standard of your teeth. So I've had comments on my teeth. Fine, that's fine. I don't really give a shit. You know what I'm saying? But I know a lot of people are obsessed with the teeth. But of course, because they're applying this pi measurement to the teeth as to whether they're perfect or not. So this is where you can see it being applied, you know. But look what they've done. You've got you obsessed with your teeth, you're fluoriding yourself every morning, every night. You know, you're going dentist, you've got all sorts of false stuff going in there. You don't know what's in them things. What are they leaching? Do they have transmitters in, nanopart? You have no idea. But obviously dentistry was a very important industry in relation to them gaining control over you. So they're obfuscating it from you, this golden ratio pi and Fibonacci, but they're using it in everything, you know. Now then, interesting here, the pine cone is an interesting example of a clockwise spiral, but also an anti-clockwise spiral operating to create or manifest something that exists and bears fruit and, you know, repopulates the tree. So we can see there that in the pine cone, a merging of counterclockwise with clockwise creates something of beauty, something of worth. It's natural. Yeah, whereas we're taught through occult to see the left and right as opposites, what we can see in the pine cone is that it actually is showing us that if you actually pull together clockwise and anti-clockwise in a balanced way, or how it should be, simplicity, you get good manifestation. They've divided that up through the inverting of the Kabbalah in the occult system, so they're all operating inverse, not just left, right, but top down. You know, it's a double inverse in that respect. So, I mean, I know most people are not going to understand it, but you occultists do understand this, of course. And in many of my videos, some people might not understand what I'm saying, or they might say you haven't sourced it. Well, in many cases, I'm not necessarily speaking to the lay. I'm speaking to people who already understand certain subject matter that I know that most people haven't actually studied. So it would make sense to them. So I do apologise if sometimes you feel that I'm being about, but that is just a knowledge base. It's a science, and people either understand it or they don't. And that's probably why some people get a bit miffed. So my apologies, but I won't apologise because there's a method in it, I will say. So in the pine cone, we can see counterclockwise and clockwise are not antithesis. They're actually, if worked together, still create a manifestation that's beauty. It's in sync with the creation. It's when you divide it up and you're putting them against each other that you're in the world, which of course, that's what the world requires in order to build it. The division, and you know what I'm saying, it needs that, an opposition to, rather than in harmony with, which is what the pine cone is basically showing us. And of course, the pine cone is a symbol used throughout Roman Catholicism. It's used in many ancient cultures, you know, the Caduceus, etc., the two serpents, all this stuff, it's all there. Because the serpent is, you know, everything is double-edged, and people forget this. You know, like everybody goes, oh, Saturn's this, that, the other. No, Saturn is a planet that exists. We know it as Father Time. But everything is in the world system, the way the world approaches things, changes the frequencies at which energy then has to manifest. So it's manifesting it as divisive. So naturally then, everything that exists is divided into good and bad in the minds and the frequencies that belong to the world. Does that make sense to you? I hope it does. I'm not trying to go up my own ass, but it may happen. So mathematics is the science to obfuscate math and make complex the intention of learning how nature works, which means people are not learning how nature works, which means you then need these religions. Because they're laying it out, telling you that they know. Well, no, because they're obfuscating the first chapter of Genesis and filling your minds with chapter 2 onwards, which is under the Lord. You see, I mean, that for some people is so, they probably will never accept it because it's so simple. But it's only applying yourself to what you're seeing and using your own gifts, your own essences, your own mechanics to interpret, not looking at it, getting that interpretation and then going, oh, what do they say? And off you go, you're reading that, go, well, that must be, and that gets forgotten. Job done. They've captured your energy. You're going to serve that, yeah? Now, this is where it might get up its own arse a little bit, because what I'm trying to get across here is it's not so much that the 369 is evil, as some people are purporting, and then it's therefore contrary to the Fibonacci, and that's being used obviously because they're actually missing in the Fibonacci sequence. But let's just say that if you were to use the 369 in an inverse with the Fibonacci spiral, you're not going to get the pine cone. You're not going to get anything manifest that's beneficial, yeah, in harmony. So rather than be seeing and thinking that the 369 is inherently evil, then let's start looking at how, whilst they've divided things, it's how they apply these situations into the Earth system, the simplicity that's creating the, what would be the best word? The unclean, or another version, a false, fake, fictitious view of what is. So I've just said for 369 counterclockwise manifestations as opposed to nature's. So it's not necessarily opposed. So the Fibonacci sequence clockwise, which is a clockwise. So the Fibonacci sequence does work in a clockwise manner. It follows the sun in its round. Now, in the occult, Widushins is how it's known if you go counterclockwise. A bit like in Mecca, they're all counterclockwise in what is believed to be the Benben stone, the remnants of the Benben stone. There's 6 stones in that big centerpiece. So that's being moved deliberately in a counterclockwise. Now, if it is the Benben stone, which is being said to have been moved to here in England under the throne in the House of Lords that the monarch sits on when she's opening Parliament, etc., and doing this, that, and the other, it's feasible. It is feasible that wherever the Benben stone goes, its influences then spread. And interestingly, over the weekend, we're looking at some data that was presenting it as the Benben stone could represent the hive mind or the insect mind. It needs a queen. Everybody follows. They've no mind of their own. They just blindly follow, as a hive mind. They don't necessarily understand why they're following it. They don't necessarily understand the doctrine that is being told to them, tells them to follow it. It's a blind, automatic hive connection to a queen or a leader or some, you know what I'm saying, some god. So that, again, sort of fit in with where I've been looking at with some of these concepts that we're going through today on the back of this mathematics is a weapon, as it were. So we're basically looking at, is it how it's implemented, these 369 in relation to the Fibonacci, that creates harmony with the earth, or the world, which is disharmony. Okay, so that's what I'm looking at in relation to trying to understand the importance of the 369. You've got to remember that Tesla, although we have this idea that he were upset, he did create a secret society, of which many elite scientists were members. So have they been deliberately setting this up as a plan? And was our Tesla not necessarily the guy we're being told he was, So, of course, if we know from the pine cone that if the clockwise, counterclockwise can work together in sync, in harmony, and create something good, in sync and harmony with the earth, and thus with the original creation. So something is wrong, and it's the mathematics that's sending people off onto the wrong path, in my opinion, and totally off the mark. So if we look at it from that perspective, and we've all been brainwashed with this Tartaria empire, that we're using different technology in a different way, are we then seeing that what that was, rather than necessarily being centered in Tartaria, Is that the applied science that was put forward after the man Jesus brought back the law in order to get rid of what had been, the breaking of the law? Is that science as a science? And because you look at the Gospels, they're not what you think they are. The law, the astronomy, astrology, it's all this stuff intermixed in. But if you don't know those subjects, you wouldn't be able to see in them. So if all you've ever done is study the biblical doctrine, you're at a loss. If all you've ever done is study the Jewish doctrine, you're at a loss. If all you've ever done is study Islamic doctrine, you're at a loss, because there's a lot of sciences that you're not aware of. And naturally then, they've captured your energy, your natural resource, because you are classed as a natural resource. And now, of course, they don't need you and your resource, because now you are costing the world. Some people say, well, why would everybody be born like this time? Well, because the universe is trying to fill this place back with man. But unfortunately, most of those that are coming in here are getting sucked up and picked off into this world. Especially the younger generations, because they've been programmed to it. They don't know anything different, which is why we see what's going on to the older generations. So, it's science. It's action-reaction. It's all causality. It's all part of a strategy. And once, this is what they can achieve once they've harnessed all the natural resources, the natural energy, as it were. So I'm thinking, you look at Atlantis, it was supremely technological, but obviously for it to reach that stage, was it using these systems in the correct way, creating harmony? So instead of creating the false world, man was actually advancing, because man was using technology or math in the correct way. So the manifestation then was beneficial. It was in sync with the earth. Yeah? Because we know that Atlantis is pre. And most people today study the narrative of the biblical text, which is the Old Testament, what you're not supposed to do and what happens when you're getting it wrong. But as I've said again, only one chapter in Genesis is worthy of anything, your time. The rest of it is the God of the world, the Lord. Which is what you all fixate to. Is it any wonder we're in this mess? When really inside yourself, you want to be in sync with the Creator. That's what you want. But it's only a belief. This is the sad part of this. Billions of people continuing to act on a belief because it's not reality. It's the map inside your mind, but it doesn't fit with terra firma, the territory. It doesn't. It's not the earth, which is why it's going somewhere it shouldn't. And you as an individual feel helpless to stop it. Yeah? They've controlled the hive minds, and that's where it's going. That frequency, they've changed the frequency. The energy then is being coded. It's told what to manifest. And that's why that energy is manifesting. So the alien thing is trying to dislodge you from responsibility for why we're in this mess. No, we're in this mess because your energy is feeding the fiction, the false, the fake, And the hell is going to come because these truths are not being recognized in time. Therefore, hell is going to manifest. And we're all in it. Yeah? So let's have a look. So in going against this, inverting this code into the natural is destructive. It's a destructive energy. So instead of manifesting harmony and growth, this false system is manifesting destruction. And people are destroying themselves on their own fruition. Yeah? It's because you're trapped in the mathematics of things, not the math. So look, energy follows thought. We all know this. So if within ourselves, you see, if our chakras are transmitting into our aura what we receive through the crown chakra, the mind then is the filter. And we could say, depending on our state of mind, or what frequencies are our minds operating, will depend on what the transmission is from our chakra system into our auric field and then on into this hologram. So if your frequencies that your mind is operating with are not in tune with the earth, the emanations coming out from you are building what? Yeah? Do you know what I'm saying? So as the mind isn't the be all and end all, it's the sort of computer that formulates all that's within you. Because from within you, then you're transmitting it out into this beautiful earth. So just to complete, should we really be concerned about this new technological system, which is playing with frequencies, it's irradiating, and they're setting up all around us, within our homes? You're carrying around with you day in, day out, you're fixed to it, you're stuck to it. Is this the method by which, with this technology, they can actually change the frequencies that we're all within, because we can't get out of it? You know, it's everywhere. And they wouldn't be setting up and paying all this money if it didn't have a serious use for them. We've got an insight to their mindset, what they're doing, what they want to do. Because are they, through this system, able to gate crash the creative principle? You know, and thrust it upon the entire population, so that the entire population is then gate crashing the creative principle with something that should not be. And that we are then building what it is they covered. You know, we're breathing and thinking life into this thing because we're using it, you know. And let's look at what's building. It's contrary to our own existence. There's no sanity in that, ladies and gentlemen, none whatsoever. So regardless of your position, your standing, who you think you are, who you think you're not, you know, if you've got offspring and, you know, you've still got a future yourself, what is it that we're building for these negative, inverse frequencies that play out through our elites, are playing out through all the systems that they've captured, and, you know, are pretty much turning and twisting everything up that's moral into just a mass debauched orgy. And it's being thrust upon your offspring from the age of 4. You know, that's, you know, whatever we need to do, we need to start acting in accordance with the path that will bring us back to recognizing that handing our offspring over to these monsters isn't a good idea. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, much to ponder. And I'm sure some of you out there are going to have some things to say about it. Please feel free, because this is an exploration. It's an exploration, and I think it needs to be done. Because this, to understand this, is how we can move off back into synchronicity with what, you know, the Fibonacci sequence, the math, and get away from the complexity of things. And as an individual on a personal journey, I think you can do nothing but enhance our own experience as we head into this manifestation of the world under the Lord. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I will say, till the next time.